Hi, Terry Bolt here with material from Chapter 3 on research, and we're going to cover a bunch of tools today. So we'll look at this particular video, we'll look at Scholar and Zotero and searching for references, and then we'll do another video on other tools. So this is the sort of second ring of our TWIST approach. We have gone through objectives and opportunities, and now we're going to do research. In fact, when we're doing opportunities, we're doing a little bit of research, so it's a natural connection, but now we're going to dig a little bit deeper. So what do we mean by research? Well, here's Merriam-Webster's definition. Their first one is a careful or diligent search, and that's really the way we're going to look at it for the tactical writing approach. But it can also be a serious inquiry or examination where you go much more aimed at the discovery and interpretation of facts. And depending on the type of tactical writing you're doing, if you're writing scientific papers or very technical proposals or legal briefs or whatever, that would be the kind of tactical writing research you would have to be doing. The third definition is collecting information about a particular subject. We want to go a little bit more than just collecting, because I can collect a bunch of random stuff. It's not going to be as practical. So we're going to go with one, careful or diligent search. So the purpose of our research is to gather accurate, relevant, and up-to-date information that supports and strengthens our tactical writing process. And a little bit like we had loops for the objectives, we're going to have some looping going on with respect to our research, because as we find data and facts that are essential, they can also be suggesting or refining our story, and we can gain ideas from them. So we might need to go back, refine the story, and then use that to reassess where we are. This is a little bit different than the way I often use the word research on my pure academic side, where I'm looking at trying to do research to discover new things. This is more literature research or background research as we use in tactical writing. The goal of tactical writing is not to produce a new thing, except for the output document types of stuff we will get. So we want to keep that in mind. So our keys when we go looking for research are to think about what are the sources we're going to use, how credible and reliable are they, and then sort of the timeliness of them and their applicability. And so I want to make sure we get into this as we go through the searching process, because understanding credibility and reliability, we'll get to it again when we get into storytelling later, but the story has to be credible and reliable. And depending on who you are when you're doing your tactical writing or presentation, you might have instant credibility because you're well known in the area you're working in, but as students, you probably need to get credibility and reliability from the references you use. They are what going to give you credibility. You saying something is true is not near as useful as a well-known researcher or as somebody who's in the field you're talking about, say sustainability. A sustainability expert saying something is important is very different than you saying it's important. And so you're going to get credibility by the way you cite and reference them. Timeliness is important, especially in fields that are continually changing, as most science and technical fields continue to evolve very quickly. Citing something that's 3 years old saying this is an unsolved problem may no longer be true. 10 years ago, we didn't have many of the things we have today, and 3 years ago, we didn't have many of the most advanced things we have today, like ChatGPT. So you have to be careful and make sure your references are timely. And then applicability will be how much they apply to the particular situation. So there are some tactical research techniques and things that are out there. So first, there's a library and industry-specific databases. Using databases relevant to your field to gather technical and industry-specific information. Joel, who's our librarian for this class, is actually doing a separate video just on some of the specialized databases. And don't think, oh, Google is all I need. There's information in those specialized databases that you will not find easily, if at all, by using Google, because of the way the data is both collected and curated, but also because of the way Google searches. It might be in Google someplace, but you're not going to go to the 5,000th page that Google could find for you. So you're going to give up long before you find that information. So part of the reason to consider those databases is because they have very specific uses. There's some techniques we're not going to really get into, but will be more useful when we start talking about trying to understand some of your audience, which is a kind of research, but we'll cover that in the next chapter. So looking at stakeholder interviews, where you basically talk with subject matter experts, end users, and decision makers. Notice those may or may not be your audience. So subject matter experts are people who might you want to use to influence people. So stakeholder interviews, are a great way of getting real information. We're not going to cover them much in this class because they're both more complicated and expensive and time consuming to set up. And so we're going to stick with more the kinds of research you'll be able to do as students. A competitive analysis is a kind of tactical research that really focuses on competitors or similar entries to understand the landscape, identify gaps you might get into when you're looking at research. You can do some of this with Google. In fact, this is Google. Regular Google is pretty good for doing competitive analysis to find things that are out there. But sometimes that also involves going through networks and connections to find out what's going on. Again, because the class effort here is not going to focus so much on your startup business, which is where this competitive analysis would be critical. We're not going to spend as much time on this. But if you're working in industry, being able to do a competitive analysis research would still use some of our same types of materials we'll talk about today, and that might be one of the places where you use those specialized databases. Trend analysis, using things like Google Trends and industry publications to identify current trends and insights. You can get trends from Google Trends. You can find it easily. You can look for trends that are going on. Depending on where you're going, that can be really insightful or not particularly useful, because what's trending, what's being searched for in Google, or what's being mentioned on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, those things are about what's trendy, but that may or may not be great for where you're trying to go on a say a proposal or a tactical writing situation, unless you're talking about where's the world going. And then there's a whole bunch of government and NGO reports that often provide very comprehensive, reliable information on various sectors and issues. So if you're working in an area, you'll be able to find some of those reports from using Google, but you're going to sometimes want to go to the actual sites of those places and try and find them again, because general Google searches won't necessarily get there. But if you start asking for government report on as your Google terms, you may actually get to where you want to be. So for academics, you can reliably limit yourself to generally peer-reviewed conferences, articles, if you're working in that kind of stuff. And again, those are something, if you're working in scientific fields, they're pretty straightforward. We'll actually show you how to get to those through some other things using Google Scholar, which will probably get you almost all you need at this current level. There are some very refined, sophisticated search techniques in library databases, advanced searches. And you can use those, but it can actually be pretty confusing to have so many different ways to choose from. So most students, my guess is you've already been doing this for your research. You would use a search engine like Bing or Google. We're going to start with Google. I'm not even going to cover the very basics of Google. You go to google.com, you type stuff in. But there's a couple things that I think are worth mentioning. So two things that I find students struggle with when they're trying to deal with Google is you're going to get a lot of references. If you're doing good research, you might come up with 50 or 100 references in half an hour session of research. I strongly recommend you learn how to use Google Bookmarks or the tool Zotero that I'll talk to in a little bit to track your URLs, and maybe even to use the nice thing about Zotero compared to Bookmarks is you can track the URL and take some notes. And if you forget about this is something I've done myself, and then it's like, I found that, but I forgot to bookmark it. You can go back through your history in Google and search using keywords in your history to find the things you might have forgotten to bookmark. But just get in this habit when you're doing research for tactical writing to make a new bookmark or to set up a new Zotero collection and put stuff in it. The second is that, good or bad, Google searches have many related items, but the sorting includes a bunch of non-content related criterion these days, things like page load speed, which is great when people are trying to get products out and Google wants to make sure you have a great mobile experience. All of those go into what is now Google's search order. So in my view, actually, Google's search orders got much worse in the last 5 or 10 years than it used to be, because I'm looking for relevant stuff and I don't care how fast my page loads or if it's set up for mobile, if I'm searching on my laptop, right? So it's been tricky. But one of the things they have added that makes it a little bit better, going back to closer to the way things were, is under the tools, and you sort of see this, I'm not going to show the whole page, but after you do a Google search, there'll be a place where you'll sort of see all filters and tools. If I click on tools, I can go down and I can choose verbatim, which means don't replace the words I put with other words, because it does a lot of synonym analysis. And it can do that in ways that sometimes give you a bunch of non-relevant stuff. If you're looking for a very particular word, using verbatim can make that a whole lot more powerful. You used to be able to get this with a plus operator, which was it has to exactly match this word, but that's been more problematic in terms of how I've seen it used. So I've been using verbatim a lot more. The second thing is that, especially when you're searching for timeliness, right? You want to possibly look for particular things. So you can look for things in the last month or the last year, or you can type a custom range, which is actually pretty interesting if you're trying to find older things, like what was the state of the art in 2020, or what was some. By putting in a custom range and limiting your stuff, it's not perfect because, in fact, many websites use blogs or things that have continually updating dates, and so it gets a little bit confused. And I'm not going to show you as an example of it, but that can be another way of making your searching a little bit more powerful. And many of you already know about this. You can actually search using images. So here I took the cover of the book, older version of it, and did a search. And basically, you click on the lens icon, you upload an image, you can go find things that look like this. You can do this with hand-drawn drawings, although you get more hand-drawn drawings when you do that. Or you can search with words, right? So I can put in words, or I can put in image. These are two different examples of what you can do. But the other thing I want to show here is, again, so after you have this, you can look at sizes, colors, types, and time, age, how old they are. But there's an important one here, which is usage rights. If you're going to use other people's artwork in a proposal or in a document from tactical writing, you have got to decide what kind of license do you need. If I'm going to use it once in a presentation to a small group of people, the government would consider that fair use, and I can probably get away with just about anything. But if I'm going to use it in a very public presentation at a TED Talk or something where there's going to be an audience and people might be making money, then I might need to make sure I have a usage right that is Creative Commons, and then I cite appropriately where the imagery came from. Another useful technique is to use these for inspiration and then go make your own artwork out of it. So for what we're going to be doing, this might still be useful, but most people already know this. I just want to make sure everyone has seen enough of this because you will have to use that. For the core research kinds of things that I do lots of and you will need for some of your proposals, we're going to use scholar.google.com. And this is a search engine for more academic, although it includes some non-academic materials as well. In Google, sign up with publishers, and one of the important things is it lets them search behind their firewall. So there's a lot of material out there that you can only get to if you have paid. But Google's search process through scholar.google.com has basically been paid to get through it so that the publishers get the links in Google Scholar, and then it might send you to there, and you might be asked to pay if you want to see this particular article, but you can use it as a great way of searching. They have a modified search algorithm, so it excludes some non-scholarly material as whatever Google has defined. So this is the other thing that makes it effective is if you're looking for, say, references on sustainability or references on education, because that's the kind of material you're looking for your tactical writing, you'll find more scholarly material. Things that when you go to site will have for a lot more credibility than just some random blog post from somebody. It has a mixture of per paper and per venue citations to help with reference. It's never really clear to me exactly why they sort them in the way they do, and I've actually asked some people who work for Scholar.google.com. The other really nice thing is it includes library allocations for full library access. I'll show you an example in a second. And that library link is, if you set it up, allows you to get through to get to materials. If you search from campus, I think by default it will be set up, but I'll show you how to set up when I do the quick demo in a bit. So as I said, it has access to material behind locked subscription barriers, so you can find it and then decide if you want to pay for it. To be there, the content has to have an abstract. Google won't index if it doesn't at least have an abstract. If it has full text access, it requires institutional subscription or payments. Unless it's open access, that's okay. They'll still link to it, and then you'll be able to figure out if you want to get it. It includes peer-reviewed papers, theses, books, preprints, abstracts, full-text citations. The citations is the weird one. They will sometimes include something because somebody cited it, even though they can't get to it themselves, to let you know that it's out there and it's been used. And because they manage all the citations, they can do that. And as I said, it includes open URL links to local library data that can get there. A very useful thing is that it includes citation data, and I'll show you a little bit about that as we go through the demo in just a bit. But a couple things they did not do. They didn't create a controlled vocabulary. So when you go to search, you're searching with whatever words you want. There's no standard set of definitions. When you go work with a reference librarian, they will often know the right vocabulary to find various kinds of things, especially when you're first starting in a field or just starting at doing research. You may not use the right term to describe something, which means when you go to search for that term, it's not going to work. They didn't create any standardization of journal names or abbreviations, and so there's a great milieu of differences that will show up that you have to deal with when you go to actually use them as formal citations. They don't give you any details of which journals, publishers they include, other than what you can find. Obviously, if you can find it, they've included it, but if it's not there, you don't know why. And it's very hard to figure out sometimes if something isn't there because it's not indexed or because it's just not published yet or not relevant. So they don't really give any information on how to synthesize what's scholarly or any indication of their update frequency. It does get updated throughout the year. Once a year they release new metrics, but in terms of when new content gets added, it's never clear. And as I said, they give little indication of how it works, what they're excluded, and why. So take that to mean that just because you didn't find something doesn't mean it's not out there. If you see a citation in a book or paper that you're looking at, then that becomes a really good way of saying, I know this exists, I'm going to go keep searching until I find it. So a couple of things about searching with it, and then I'm going to do a quick demo. So first, like the regular Google, there's a weak and implied between the words in the sense that it's going to try to find a bunch of those words. The more of the words it finds, the higher the score and relevance it'll have. But it doesn't have to find all of them. I can use a plus to include common words. So if I use a word, a letter, or a number that generally Google would ignore. So if I want to find something that has the word to in the title of a paper, if I just include the word to, it's going to ignore it because the word to is just way too common. So, but if I put a plus in front of it, I can. I can use the standard quotation marks to search for a particular phrase, the minus sign to exclude terms. There's actually terms for either or and an or to actually allow you to do some Boolean stuff. Author is a particular way of searching for authors. In title, restricted by date and publication. And there's an advanced search screen available that will let you set up and program by filling out fields, and then you can actually see the resulting text. So I'm going to quickly do first just show you some examples that I'll point to stuff, and then I'll actually go ahead and do an actual search. So here's, I've searched for tactical writing. It gives me a bunch of references. You notice they're not in order cited by, right, 2005, 16, 25, right? So they're not in that order. They're not in date order. I can actually sort by date. So if I want to find the most recent things, I can sort by date and figure out what's going on. If I'm looking for review articles, surveys, I can click on review articles and it'll limit its search to just those kinds of things, which when you're first getting started to try and get some research, that can be actually very useful. Over here, I can click on create alert. Probably not so relevant for this particular class, but when you're doing research as a researcher, this is often very useful because it'll basically send you an email every time your search terms come up. So you can figure out a search and then get updated every time something new comes out. So if you really want to stay on top, it can do that. And obviously over here, I can also mess with understanding what are the dates and whatever. If I want to get to an advanced search, I go up to this triple bar and I click on it, and it pops up the advanced search window with the words I have in it. And when I go to do that, I can then just say, these are the words, the exact phrase, at least one of the words. Without the words, as you can go through this, so one of the things that's here is, like, if you're trying to use articles published in, you have to know exactly how they use the name, and you'll sort of see G, Pol, Chem, right? Nature is probably Nature, that's straightforward, but Journal of Biological Chemistry is, I guess. So very often if I want to search using the published in, I first search for some things until I find the exact phrase that Google uses and then use it. While they don't have a standardized form for all things, once they use a particular term, they try very much to keep using that term for all of the things that are in there. So this gives you a high-level overview. And before I get to actually doing the real demo, I want to talk about one of the problems that many people have. So one of the problems when I'm trying to search with a search engine by using phrases, keywords that I type in there, is that there's a whole bunch of things that I might get wrong. So I might not be using the right word. There's a whole bunch of isms like acronyms, hypernisms, synonyms, neologisms. These are all a bunch of terms about terms and how they're related. And so it becomes sometimes very tricky to know, should I search with abbreviations or not? Am I using a synonym? And Google does Google does pretty good with synonyms. Google Scholar's okay with them, but it's not as right. So in general, you can use some search terms, but when you don't know the lexicon of what's going to go on, this can be really tricky. So Google gives you some much more powerful ways to do that. Now, these are what I was going to actually demo. I can find all the papers that cite a given paper. I can find a whole bunch of related papers. And by these two techniques, you can very quickly get to hundreds of related papers in under 5 minutes, and then browse them or scan them for relevance and use your library to help manage, or use a tool like Zotero to help manage them. So I'm now going to make a quick pause as I switch over the video, and I'll do a quick demo. Okay, so I'm back, this is the same search I had a second ago. As I said, you can sort of see it says cited by. Actually, I'm going to show you a few other things first. So if I click on this thing, it'll show me all 6 versions. It's sort of showing me that there's different versions of exactly the same thing. Some are just citations. That can sometimes be useful because sometimes when I can't get to it directly, I don't see these PDFs. If I click on it, sometimes one of the other versions, I don't know if this one will or not, I can see versions. No, can't get to any of them. Sometimes that'll be a useful way of getting there. So a couple of things I wanted to show. So first, if I'm looking to cite something, I can just click on Cite, and it will show me properly formatted 5 or 6 versions of various types of references, and also ways to export it to EndNote, RefMan, RefWorks, or BibTeX. These are different tools we might use. So I can quickly get reasonably well formatted and consistent citations. And in case you forgot from your first writing class, right, different styles of references will use different ways of formatting that are important. So like here, the date is in Harvard is first. In MLA, it's the dates at the very end. In APA, it's after the name, but in parentheses. You want to make sure your references are properly done, and this can make that a whole lot easier. But as I said, the other two things, let's say that I decided that this tactical writing was actually, of interest to me. I can find, although the word tactical writing didn't find that many, there's 887. If I put it in quotes, right, I'll get a smaller number of articles. In fact, these are much smaller. There's now only 137 when I do the quotes. So that's not as many. But if this paper was of interest, once I find a paper of interest, I then use it to get me more papers of interest. So the first way is I just click on related articles, and Google will give me, in this case, 14 books. And it's a book because the other one was a book. Give me 14 things that are very related in Google's concept of what relation means. Almost always somewhat related. You got to figure what it is. If I'm doing more academic work, I will sometimes go in here. I'll click on Cited By, and this will allow me to have, in this case, 2,000 articles that cited this particular paper. And now I might go through here, and notice I click on this button that says Cite within these, and I'm going to look for proposals, proposal writing. Right? And so now there are 400 papers that cited the tactics of innovation about writing, that talk about writing proposals, right? Or at least have the words writing and proposal, right? So you can sort of see from the bit snippets here, they're really not proposal writing. Go back and make it about proposal writing. And there's nothing, right? So none of those actually address that particular topic. But anyway, this gives you a quick thing to get, as I said, to the advanced. You go down here, you do the advanced thing. The other thing I want to show you here, there are 2 things. One is my library. In my library, that's not what I wanted. I have a bunch of articles in my library. If I go back to settings, a couple of things about the settings. So you can say how many it's going to show you. You can basically say how you want your citations imported or exported. But the important one I want to touch on here is library links. In this case, I'm using just the WorldCat library, and it'll go through campus's library when I'm connected to campus. I can, when I'm signed in off-campus links, I can actually make it go through and do those extra things. And then, so you can add a Google Scholar button. That's not what I was looking for. If I wanted to set up alerts, I have to do them outside of here. Alerts. And if I go into alerts, I have 2 different sets of alerts set up, so it sends me all of those things. And then my library, which I clicked on before, I have a bunch of different libraries, different things I've set up, And they're useful. If I go back to here, you actually saw a star. So if I go to click on something as a star, right, it puts it in as what library do I want to add it to? My reading list, cited by me, a couple of particular ones I want to do. So, and that then I have a library. So this is another way if you're doing searches with Google Scholar instead of bookmarking. So now we'll get back to talking about it. Give me a quick pause. Okay, back. So now our next topic is we've been able to do a bunch of searches, and as I said, you can use bookmarks for regular Google. Bookmarks don't work so well for Google Scholar because I guess if you go to the PDFs or whatever you can, but when you're working on large-scale tactical writing projects, keeping track of your references is very important. And so because so many people do this, there's a whole bunch of tools that have been developed to create and manage the list of references for the research projects as you're going through this. Most tools are designed to optimize citations in specific formats and preparation, manuscript, and bibliography. If any of you struggled in your other writing classes to properly format references and to keep track of them, you'll appreciate this tool very quickly. So there's a whole bunch of tools that provide ways to manage the references. In fact, you can often set them up so they download the references so you can see them later and you don't have to keep reaccessing them online. So if you're going to work offline, that's great. There's a couple of big tools that are out there. So I would say the top 6 are these: Zotero and Mendeley, which are free, and then subscriptions, reference managers, EndNotes, RefWorks, and ProCite. My personal favorite out of all of these, the only one I actually would ever bother to use again is Zotero, and I still use Zotero. So I'm going to show you this as an example. Much of the functionality I'm going to cover is also available in most of those other tools, but I'm going to show it to you from the Zotero point of view. So it's free, open source. It has both a reference management tool as well as a local thing that'll work with Firefox web browser. There's standalone versions for Chrome, Safari, and you can download it from here. And this assignment, you're going to download it because I'm going to want you to use it for your next homework assignment. So Zotero recognizes bibliographic information on books, articles, and extracts information. Usefully, it can store related PDFs, images, files, links, and stuff in your library. So when I'm using this for searching, I can go ahead and quickly stick things in it. It can create a proper bibliography for Word or for OpenOffice, or I work in LaTeX, it can export stuff into LaTeX as well. Another reason I've switched to this one is very useful, even though for LaTeX I don't really need it that much, is that they published, basically you can have shared libraries for your organization, class, or research group. I'm actually going ahead and make up a Zotero collection for this class for one of the joint proposals we're going to work on, so you'll all be able to put things in and out of it, and it does a pretty good job of doing that. So you basically you can download it for whatever version you choose. I'm going to briefly go over a version just using static slides because I assume most of you are going to be using Windows, and sometimes I don't. I use Linux. I don't want to show you too much of my version because it would look a little bit different. So this is from some slightly older slides from the previous version when I was running Windows. So basically on your taskbar, there'll be a little Z. You can start that. That's a standalone icon. When you click it up, it's going to have a bunch of the papers you've loaded into it. And there's a bunch of libraries here where you can look at various library. You can choose which library you want to look at in terms of the data. For its Word and OpenOffice plugins, it allows you to easily integrate stuff directly. So instead of, if you did this before by hand, you did things like square, open parenthesis and somebody's name and year like you were doing in API style, or you wanted to have square bracket 7 because you were doing an IEEE style. You don't do any of that. Basically, after you install the plugin, you click on Zotero, so Zotero's running and you have the plugin running. Inside your Microsoft Word, there'll actually be, I go forward, there'll be a little Zotero thing here, and when you click on Zotero, it's going to give you options. This little toolbar shows up, and then you can click on various things to add a citation. You can insert a bibliography. You can edit the bibliography. I don't recommend editing them too much, but you can insert them. If you want to edit something, you should go back and find the citation and edit it. But you can also set your document preferences here to say, like, do I want APA or MLA or IEEE, whatever style I want. There's like 5,000 styles you can make it use. So, to add a reference, I go in, I click on it, I can choose a style. If it's not in my document preferences, it'll actually make me choose a style, and then I'll set it up and I'll keep using that one. And it'll have a couple of questions about like how you want to deal with the things that are there. When I go to insert something, I basically, after I click Add Citation, it's going to pop up, and I can say Keep Sources Sorted. So it's going to keep, if I add 3 things, it's going to keep them in the sorted order. It could also give me the classic view. So after I click on that, it's going to pop up a little window. You can go then click on the ones you want, and down here you can sort of see there's a multiple sources button. If I click on the multiple sources button, then I can add 5 or 6 things all at once. So if you want to add 20 references, you can do it really, really fast by doing this. So in this case, if you go in and you clicked, you added 3 Vancouver style references, and then at the end you click on the insert the bibliography, puts them in sorted order. Vancouver is a particular style where things show up in the order they're cited, which makes it easy to find where in the references you want to look, but it makes it really painful when you want to insert a new reference if you're doing it by hand. With this, I could just go up into the paragraph. I could go in here, add a new reference, and it would automatically resort the bibliography when I'm done. To get it to resort, I might need to hit refresh. Sometimes it refreshes it on, sometimes it doesn't. There's a gazillion citation styles, and so you can go in and choose them, and whatever. And if there's a style you want to use, you can go to Styles and download new ones. And so you can figure out what style you want and then click on Install to install it. If you're using it in a browser, you may need to click on this to see that it's been added. To add it, registering to use the website version is optional. It's free. You don't have to. If we're going to use shared things like we will in this class, you're going to actually need to do that. So if you want to add citations to Zotero, it's pretty straightforward. You can basically manually enter them, which is a fool's errand. I don't recommend you do that. You can import them for a single source, multiple sources. It can actually use it to automatically cite web pages or add a system identifier. If someone tells you the ISBN or whatever, you can go ahead and add it and it will go look it up for you. So if I want to add something manually, right, I'm not going to actually go through that. I'm just going to skip over that. You basically type a bunch of fields. But one of the things that makes Zotero so useful is it's compatible with a whole bunch of databases, including the 2 biggest ones used, Google Scholar and PubMed. And I'm actually going to demo this in a second, just so you can sort of see as I go through this. So basically, when you add it, you get this little folder icon that shows up in your icon bar. And when you do that, if you click on something on this folder, I can actually ask it where I want to save them. And once I've done that, it will pop up and give you some things. So in this case, I just searched for a bunch of papers by me, and the scaling's a little bit off. That should have been, go back. Oh no. This box should have been this little folder here. I don't know why it's scaled off. So, but when you click on that folder, first it'll yell at me because I didn't have Zotero running. So I'll click it again. And then on the Google Scholar page, it's going to have one line for the title of every paper that was found on this page. And then if I just click on with the check marks and click on OK, it's going to import all of those into my Zotero system. If I want, I can go when I want to attach things, I can basically ask it while I'm doing things to attach a link to a URL, attach stored copies, and I can set these as preferences so that all the time, every time I click on a paper, it'll download the PDF. And when I go to attach things, it can add that in. So, and then I can go through this. In this case, I'm playing with particular papers. One of the things I like about Zotero, and one of the things I recommend, is to take notes when you're doing this. So I can add something in, and I can take some notes about why I was looking at this particular paper and what my notes were, and then later on I can search through my notes to do some stuff. If you're using bibliographies and BibTeX, it's great for doing this as well. I can create a bibliography just from a particular set of items, and then use that to export them and get them in various references. As I said, if you want to go get any particular style, you go here, click on install. Most of the default ones will be there that you're going to need, but you never know. Somebody might tell you, if you're submitting to a journal or working with somebody that's going to the American Sociology Association style, They may not be in the default installation, but you can always go add it. So on Zotero.com, you can create an account. You're going to need this to synchronize libraries and participants in groups, which is one we'll do in this class. It does data synchronization between different library items. It can be a little tricky if two different people add the same exact reference with different naming conventions, but it does a pretty good job of deciding these are probably duplicates and ask you to resolve them as it does the sync. And then, so to do this, you basically have these online libraries where you click on My Library and you can sort of show you what different libraries you're having. So I know that was very quick. You will be using this for your assignments this week. So if you want more details and you want to see more slow tutorial, you can go to Zotero.com, support screencast tutorials, and they have a bunch of tutorials about what they're doing. I put some extra group stuff here. So when you're trying to create a new group in your online version, you can go ahead and just click on this and it'll make a new group so you can make new items. And then the support page, there's frequently asked questions and screen grant tutorials. Because it's free, there's not a lot of real-time support, but there's lots of people using it, so you'll be able to get that. So, and again, that's their quick start guide if you want any more details. So that's it for our research basics. Again, quick introduction to using these, which will be useful as we start going through the assignments this week. We'll have another video probably posted later in the week on the specialized library databases, which you won't need for this week's assignment, but that'll get you going for what you need to do.